The biggest, in my view, was what's known as Bentwaters or Rendlesham Forest. So I want to talk to you about the UFO. He says, oh, you mean the one I touched? And here's this thing hovering out in the trees ahead of them. As I recall, two of them come over and shoot a beam at his feet.
What are some of the other incidents that you studied?
Oh, I think the biggest, in my view, was what's known as Bentwaters or Rendlesham Forest. Chuck Holt is probably the best guy on this. Chuck was the deputy base commander at Bentwaters, and this is volumes written on the particular case, but I found it very significant because of the number of people involved. And it's one of the few cases. Most of the time you study these things and the credibility, this is one that gets stronger over time. And more people coming out. And now they found, fairly recently, radar confirmation that there was something over the base. And it was not a singular event. What I learned from Chuck later, this had been going on for a long time. And it turns out this was almost like the ranch kind of thing where the events had been reported for decades.
It just keeps happening. It just keeps happening.
Of various kinds. I mean, some of them were lights in the sky and strange phenomena being reported. But the particular one here was, and it started in late December 1980. By the way, you should come back to Cache Landrum because it's interesting that happened at the same night. But so this one's out there, and they see what they think is a plane has crashed or something off the base. And so Roger Pennison and John Burroughs and another one go out there. And, they have to, this gets very sensitive now because you're leaving a military base and have to leave. These are air policemen. Leave the weapons behind because the SOFA agreement as to what you can and can't do and where you can do it. So they go out, and it was interesting because years later I called Jim Penniston, who was a staff sergeant at the time, and so I want to talk to you about the UFO. He says, oh, you mean the one I touched? And actually walked up on it. There's a heavy thing sitting on the ground. It's in, like I said, late December. And what was interesting is there's actually indentations on the ground. And I've seen the plaster casts from this. So you had physical evidence of this thing sitting on the ground, must have had weight. He talks about certain symbols that he saw and wrote those up. So the first incident happens. A few days later, they're having a end of the year party or Christmas party, and Chuck is there, and they're about to give out the awards for being nice people and that. And he says, the provost marshal comes in, and he says, they're back. He says, who's back? He says, the UFOs are back. And Chuck tells us both, but it was, I'll take care of this. One of the worst decisions he probably ever made, thinking, I'm going to go out and we're going to resolve this. So he gets, I forgot who the sergeant was who was with him, who gets radiac meters and things to check on radiation and whatnot, and he goes out. They go outside the base, and using the radiac. Sure enough, there's stuff above background noise, and here's this thing hovering out in the trees ahead of them, and it starts manipulating, staying away from them, then splits into 5 pieces and zips off, and as I recall, 2 of them come over and shoot a beam at his feet. And so he goes back. So he's recording this at the time of what's happening. And that eventually got released. And then the conventional wisdom was, because there's a periodicity to these lights that are appearing. And he says, it's got to be a lighthouse at some distance away. And they went back and looked at it and said, you can't see the lighthouse from there. But we have over 60 witnesses now. Are you familiar with the PRP, Personnel Reliability Program?
No.
Okay, well, again, the other aspect of what was not known at the time was that Bentwaters was the forwardmost nuclear storage area in Europe. And supposedly this thing came over and it was shooting beams down into the storage area. And I had met with Chuck. I've now moved to Los Alamos, and years later I heard about this, and I knew where he was as a civilian. I had set up lunch, like to meet with him. And what he says was, because nothing, so there was no debriefing or anything of that nature at the time. And he says, I'm finally going to get debriefed because I'm coming from Los Alamos, and no, I'm there to ask questions and whatnot. He is convinced that a lot of his people were screwed with. After this, their careers in general did not fare well. Burroughs has had significant medical issues, and some of this does get into classified. I know they had trouble even getting his medical records. I think Kit got involved in even obtaining his medical records because he was trying to address heart problems that he had. But again, it's the amount of witnesses, the physical witness, recurring event, pretty damn significant. But as I mentioned, the Cache Landrum happens at the same time. The Cache Landrum's a case where UFO was seen, importantly, it's fairly close to Houston, a remote area. Two women and a boy are driving down the road, and here's this UFO that's kind of shutting in, supposedly seeing flame out or something. And there are, depends on the count, 22, 23 helicopters that are supposedly circulating around it. Now, this is, I think it's the 27th of December. And if you know anything about what goes on between Christmas and New Year's, basically nothing. So anyway, what happens is they stop the car and they get out. Betty Cash runs around in front of it. Landrum opens the door, stands behind the little boy. Cody gets out, looks, he gets scared, runs around and jumps back. He's now grown, and they've talked to these issues. So the point was that they were exposed to some kind of radiation. And Betty Cash, who got out in front, in fact, later died from leukemia, but she has whole body radiation. Landrum, not so much, but she's standing with the car door, so it's partially blocking it. And Cody, the little boy who runs around and jumps back, so he's got minimal. So everything physically fits. Fast forward a few years, they sue the government, specifically the Air Force, over this event because of danger. And the supposition here is this was some kind of test vehicle that was out there in the radiant, and particularly because of the helicopters. What happens is that the Air Force looks at it and says, ain't ours. And besides, those are Army helicopters. And so it comes to Army IG. Well, remember, I used to work there.
Hey everybody, I'm Sean Ryan. Click here to subscribe to the Sean Ryan Show YouTube channel for the hottest and most compelling interviews that you will not see anywhere else. I've also made a playlist of all the previous SRS episodes so they're easy to find. You can find that right here.